There's a profound and deeply troubling contradiction at the heart of the British Army policy today, the thing put forward by Keir Starmer. On the one hand, the British Army has staged a highly publicised demonstration of its capabilities in Romania under the banner of NATO's Exercise Steadfast Dart, with commanders declaring the force absolutely ready for deployment in Ukraine should the political decision be made. On the other hand, General Richard Dannett, the former Chief of the General Staff, has unequivocally stated that the army is not ready, and the Kremlin, never want to miss a propaganda opportunity, has framed Prime Minister Keir Starmer's remarks about sending British troops to Ukraine as tantamount to a declaration of war. The optics, to put it bluntly, are a mess, and Starmer should have thought more carefully about voicing these ideas openly. Steadfast Dart has seen 2,500 British troops transported across Europe alongside 700 military vehicles to participate in a large-scale trench warfare drill with NATO allies just 16 miles from Ukraine's border. Now, the drills, featuring mock battles with Romanian troops, blank firing exercises, drone-assisted maneuvers, send a clear signal to Moscow. NATO stands prepared to defend its eastern flank. Brigadier Andy Watson, commanding the British contingent, has doubled down on this assertion, assuring us that his forces are trained, resourced, and at high readiness, which is superb. But there's an elephant in the room. The British Army is at its smallest size since the Napoleonic Wars, barely scraping past 70,000 troops. And as recently as 2009, the UK struggled to sustain a 9,000-strong deployment to Helmand in Afghanistan, despite possessing a force of over 100,000 regulars at the time. Today, it's inconceivable that Britain alone could sustain any meaningful peacekeeping or combat role in Ukraine. NATO estimates that a peacekeeping force would require at least 100,000 troops, several times the total combat-ready personnel that the UK could muster. Furthermore, the UK's military apparatus is a shadow of its former self. The Royal Navy's 2 aircraft carriers lack functional aircraft. That's almost laughable. The RAF is woefully short on combat-ready squadrons. The Army's mechanised divisions are reliant on ageing equipment, some of which was found to be non-operational during last year's readiness reviews. And to suggest that Britain could spearhead or significantly contribute to a NATO-led force in Ukraine is at best wishful thinking, and at worst dangerously misleading and optimistic. And this comes round to the political theatre surrounding Starmer's remarks, and his statement that the UK is prepared to consider committing British forces in a future ceasefire scenario has been eagerly misinterpreted by Moscow, which thrives on inflating Western rhetoric into existential threats, and the Kremlin's response has been swift, deploying its usual mix of saber-rattling and disinformation to frame the UK's position as a direct military challenge to Russian interests. This not only fuels domestic propaganda for Putin, but also risks solidifying Western divisions, particularly given Washington's increasing reluctance to commit further support to Kyiv. But if NATO troops are not part of a peacekeeping force, who is? The strategic reality is that Europe, despite belatedly increasing defence spending, remains structurally dependent on the United States. NATO's European members, with few exceptions, have struggled to meet their 2% GDP defence spending targets, and without American logistical and air power, any peacekeeping force would be hamstrung before it was even deployed. So, what should Britain do instead? If the goal is genuinely to secure Ukraine and prevent further Russian aggression, there's a far more effective and achievable strategy, and that's arm Ukraine to win. Rather than making grand statements about boots on the ground, troops that Britain does not, in any meaningful capacity, have to offer, Starmer should instead be spearheading an effort to accelerate the provision of heavy weaponry, air defence systems, and long-range strike capabilities to Kyiv, particularly air defence systems, because every night Kyiv and cities across Ukraine are bombarded with missiles from the Kremlin. Denmark's Prime Minister, Mette Fredriksson put it best. We need to increase military support to Ukraine. We need to produce more, and we need to do it faster. And we must remove the restrictions on the Ukrainians' use of weapons so they can defend themselves. The logic is inescapable. A weak ceasefire and a peacekeeping force would only give Russia time to rearm and attack again. And if we are there as a peacekeeping force, that attack will be a direct attack on Western troops and therefore a state of world war. Putin's expansionist ambitions will not be deterred by the presence of lightly armed British troops in an ambiguous security arrangement, but they might be deterred by a Ukrainian military capable of outright victory. And the events of the last few days, the military events of the last few days, the developments in the Kursk region are in Ukraine's favour, very much so. And while Exercise Steadfast Dart showcases Britain's ability to project force in a controlled environment, it shouldn't be mistaken for proof of genuine military readiness. The UK is not in a position to send large numbers of troops into Ukraine, nor should it be, particularly without a coherent strategic plan and robust Allied support. Instead, the focus must be on ensuring that Ukraine has the tools to win the war, rather than preparing to oversee a so-called peace that would, in all likelihood, be nothing more than a temporary Russian regrouping. Keir Starmer may have intended his comments as a show of commitment to European security, but without the hard power to back them up, they risk being little more than rhetoric that plays directly into the Kremlin's hands. And maybe guilt is prompting Starmer's enthusiasm. Guilt that he didn't stop Brexit. Guilt that Brexit lies behind Putin's opportunity. If there had been no Brexit, Putin would not have invaded. It's got nothing to do with Trump. It's a nonsense that if Trump had been in power, Putin wouldn't have invaded. It's Brexit that's done for us. Brexit that's distracted Europe. Brexit that's distracted Britain. Brexit that's distracted America. Brexit that has played perfectly into the lap of Putin and his Kremlin cronies. Britain's role in Ukraine must be as enabler of victory, not as an overstretched peacekeeper of a fragile, unenforceable settlement that's in the favour of the aggressor. The choice is not between boots on the ground and inaction, it's between arming Ukraine properly now or dealing with the consequences of Russian re-escalation later. Or there is one other possibility, and that is that Russia recognises that the war is wrong. And there is a way in which Russia can do that. If Putin is genuinely dead, now is the time to blow the whistle, call a funeral, and blame the whole sorry mess on the man who is paraded across Red Square and left to rot somewhere near Lenin's tomb.